Hey everybody, Bob Gager from Adobe here, and it's time to hang out with Bob. This is my opportunity to hang out with you guys, show you some tips and tricks and techniques for how to use Photoshop Elements, and answer any questions that you might have on some of the stuff that I'm showing off. So it's a little bit freeform, no script, no plan. We're just gonna kind of go do what we do and take it as we go along the way. So today I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about selectively colorizing and texturizing a photo. We had a request from one of our Facebook fans, John. He had a sample photo, kind of a sportsy photo that has a really interesting technique applied to it to make it look like a really cool photo. And he was wondering if you could do that in Photoshop Elements. And of course you can. It's a little more advanced of a technique. It actually brings together a bunch of different techniques. So instead of just trying to post an answer in Facebook in that comments thing, I figured I'd use it as a subject for today's Hangout with Bob. So let's get started. The first thing that I want to point out is how to use this Google Hangouts thing that we're using to do the Hangouts with Bob. If you are attending live, over here, there we go. Over here, there should be a panel. Should say questions up here. And if you type in questions, I will see them and I'll be able to answer them as I go. If you don't see the questions panel over here, then up here somewhere, there should be a little grid of 9 little dots, a little square with 9 dots. Go ahead and click on that. That'll let you pick various options for the Google Hangout screen that you're looking at. And one of them is to show the questions panel over on the right. So if you've got some questions or want to follow along with anybody who's joined us live, that's how you do it. Kind of strange, I'm hanging out with myself right now. No one has joined, but that's okay. This session is being recorded and you can always come back and watch it later. So you don't actually have to attend these Hangouts with Bob live. You can come back and watch them at your leisure over and over again because I know they're just so thrilling. You're going to want to watch them 20 or 30 times. Of course, if you're not watching live, typing in questions over here is useless because I'm not here to answer them. But if you do join in, feel free to answer some questions. And I'll be switching back and forth between this screen where I can see questions and sharing my Photoshop Elements screen. Just remember that when I'm sharing Photoshop Elements, I actually can't see the questions, so that makes it a bit of a challenge. Maybe I'll try and shrink my screen a little bit so I can see. Anyway, let's get started. So first thing I want to do is share my screen, not chat. Here we go, screen share. So instead of looking at me, you're actually looking at my screen, the same screen that I'm seeing. And I want to share, I'll just share my entire screen. That just makes it so much easier. All right, so we're sharing my screen and repeating it. We don't want to see this. What we want to see is Photoshop Elements. All right, so here I've got Photoshop Elements up and running. This is Photoshop Elements 14. I realize everyone may not have the very latest version 14. Of course, if you don't have 14, first thing you should do is rush out and buy it from your local software store or online at adobe.com or Amazon or wherever you buy software. Of course, we want you on the very latest and greatest. But if you don't have Photoshop Elements 14, don't worry. All of the techniques that I'll be showing today will work pretty much exactly the same in previous versions. Of course, depending upon how far back you go, if you're on something like Photoshop Elements 1, of course, it's going to be very different. But pretty much if you're on 11 or newer, the user interface is going to look almost exactly like we have today with a few minor differences. So hopefully you're on 14, but if you're not, that's okay. You should be able to follow along with old versions. All right, so here is the shot that John saw posted on our Facebook page that he actually really likes this technique and wants to be able to figure out how to recreate it in Photoshop Elements. Now, I don't know that I'm going to get exactly this, but I'm going to get pretty close. And a lot of it has to do with sort of your own particular preference about how much of this you want or don't want. And I'll show you how to adjust, do some fine tuning to adjust things to get the feel that you want. So I asked John to post an image that he might like this technique applied to, and he was kind enough to do that. And it's actually this picture of a volleyball game. I think this is John's daughter here serving, and he would like to get kind of a similar effect to this photo as well. So let's go ahead and get going. The first thing that I would do to this photo, again, everything I'm showing you here, optional. Some of these things are preferences, my own personal preferences. Some of these are just techniques that that you might want to use. So for me, I'd like to crop this photo. I'd like to get rid of some of the distraction of these girls playing on the court next door. This kind of reflection of, I don't know, maybe that's a reflection of the scoreboard down here. That catches my eye. And I really want to focus in on the subject, which is John's daughter here serving to the rest of the game. So let's start off by cropping. This tool right over here on the top corner, top right, top left corner of our modify section in our tools is our crop tool. Oh, I should probably mention, so up along the top here, there are different editing modes. I am in expert mode. We're going to be doing a lot of things that aren't available in quick or guided, but we'll actually take a quick trip over to quick along the way. But start off in expert mode because most of the stuff that we're going to be doing are more expert techniques. So the first thing I want to do is crop. Go ahead and click on the crop tool and grab any of these corners to kind of adjust where you want your crop to be. I want to come down the top. As I mentioned, I want to get rid of some of this distraction over on the right. I want to keep, well, no, I don't want to keep. That's a bit distraction. Let's get rid of this post. And over on the left-hand side, let's pull the left-hand side in a bit as well. We want to get rid of some of these reflections on the floor, something like that. Maybe even get rid of the scoreboard up there. Keep this girl in the background. She's ready to receive the serve. Kind of something, maybe pull the top down a little bit. Really focus in on the action that's going in the game. Hit the green check mark when we're ready. And now we've got a more tightly cropped image that we might be interested in. This image, this football player actually kind of his feet were cropped off. You might want to try that as well. You might want to crop the bottom up a little bit more. That'll give a little more kind of action to it maybe. It's up to you. Again, that's one of those personal preference things that is completely up to you. But anyway, now that we've got our photo cropped a little bit, we want to start doing some editing work on it. So the first thing I want to do is show my layers panel. Now, by default, layers are showing. Currently, mine are not showing. This button right here down in the bottom right is our layers button. If your layers panel over here on the right is not showing, go ahead and just click that button. And it's going to open up this right panel that we call layers. Let me switch back to, there we go. Nope, no questions yet. So we do have one viewer. So it sounds like, John, you may have joined us, or someone has. Welcome. Let me stop sharing my screen because real quickly, I want to point out over here on this side of your screen, there should be a questions panel. If that's not showing, there's a button up here somewhere, a little grid. To go ahead and click on the grid, select questions, and that'll open up this questions panel over here. So as I'm going, if you have some questions, you want me to go back and show you a technique or something different, feel free to answer some, or feel free to ask some questions, and I'll go ahead and answer those when I get to them. So, all right, back to screen sharing, my entire screen share, and back to Photoshop Elements. All right, so now we've got John's picture here, cropped in a little bit. We've got our layers panel showing on the right, and we want to start doing some editing to achieve that, that kind of selective black and white technique where the subject is still in color. Most of the background is black and white and kind of blurred out a little bit. It looks like kind of a pencil sketch or a cartoon look. But there is some color in here around the back of this guy's jersey. We've got a little bit of the red showing through, but it's really subtle. We really want to just have the color on the subject at hand so that that's where our eye is drawn when we're looking at this photo. So the first thing that we want to do is over here in our layers panel, this background layer. So when I opened up the JPEG file, it's going to create a layer for me called background. I want a copy of that because I don't want to start editing my original layer I want to edit a copy of it. So I can always come back and get my original. The way we do that is to simply put our mouse on top of the thumbnail and drag and drop it onto this icon right here. That's our new layer icon. And if we drag and drop an existing layer onto the new layer, it's just going to make a copy for us. So we can make as many copies as we want of our background layer. If you are not familiar with layers, they are a really powerful capability that's built into Photoshop Elements. It's what really sets Photoshop Elements apart from a lot of the other photo editing software out there. Once you learn how to use layers, it really unlocks just a ton of power in the product. This isn't a tutorial just on layers, but hopefully you'll pick up a lot of information about layers along the way. If you're not familiar with layers, maybe go do a Google search for Photoshop Elements Layers Explained, and you'll probably get 10,000 links to different tutorials all about layers, and you can dig into the gory details there. But I'll try and explain them to the level of detail necessary for this tutorial as we go. So if you don't know what layers are, think about them just as sort of stacks of photos on top of each other. And we look down from the top of that stack and see sort of a composite image of all the different stacks or all the different layers or photos stacked on top of each other, and we're looking down through all of them at one time. So think about layers that way. So I've made a copy of the background, and I actually want to make 2 copies. So I'm going to drag one more time that thumbnail onto our new layers icon, and we get another copy. And I can rename these if I want by just double clicking them and then typing something in, or I can leave them named whatever the software wants. I find naming them along the way is good because it's sort of, as I build up lots of layers, it helps me find the one I'm looking for. So the first thing that I want to do is actually not in expert mode, it's actually in quick edit. With this top layer selected, background copy 2, up here along the top I want to switch over to quick edit mode, just kind of temporarily. Because in quick edit mode, we've got a really cool feature in our effects panel. So if effects is not showing, click on the effects button down in the bottom right, and this effects panel will show. And there's a bunch of effects in here. You can play around with different ones. The one I want to get right off the bat is in this pencil sketch section. So go ahead and click on pencil sketch, and that'll apply the pencil sketch filter to your photo. Convert it to black and white to kind of make it look like it was sketched out with a pencil. Actually, I don't want the default pencil sketch. There's this one down here. Once I click on pencil sketch, I get 4 additional choices of pencil sketches. And the one I want is this one here called color pencil. So go ahead and click on colored pencil, and that will apply a colored pencil sketch effect to your photo, something like this. All right, that's all we need to do here in the quick edit mode. So switch back to expert, and you can see over here on the top right what Photoshop Elements did when we applied that colored pencil sketch effect to our background copy 2 layer. It actually made a new layer for us. So that's kind of cool because we want to work with that mainly by dragging it again to our new layers panel to make a copy of it. And now we want to convert this layer to black and white. Let me real quickly jump over here to see if John's typing anything. Yeah, there he is. Hey, John. Welcome. Hopefully everything is working. You can hear me, you can see my screen, and we're good to go. All right, and again, if you have any questions, type them in here and I'll check periodically to make sure you can follow along with what I'm doing. Okay, so now we've got a copy of this colored pencil sketch effect layer, and we want to get rid of the color. We want to convert it to black and white. So with this very topmost layer selected, under the Enhance menu is a section where we can mess around with color. In that section is a Convert to Black and White choice. So go ahead and click on Convert to Black and White. That will open up the Convert to Black and White dialog and show us the before and after. And there's a bunch of different styles of black and white conversion. You know, depending upon what you're doing, you may want to use a different one. Depending upon what kind of look you're after, you may want to pick a different one. So play around, find the one that you like. I'm actually going to pick Scenic Landscape. And there's some adjustments here. You can mess around with the sliders to fine tune it. But just for this shot, scenic landscape seems to work pretty good. And then go ahead and click OK. And that will apply the black and white conversion with the scenic landscape settings to our image. And let me double click on the hand tool over here on the left. If I double click on the hand, it'll resize my photo so it just fits in the screen perfectly. All right, so now you can see we're starting to get some of the effect. Let me switch back to your sample photo, right? So we've now got the background in black and white. We've got kind of a cartoony effect applied to it, so it's not quite so sharp as to the subjects in our photo, and we're starting to get there. The next thing that we want to do is start to play around by creating maybe some of this selective coloring. So some of this red that's along the back of this guy's jersey that's popping out, we want to get that showing up in our photo because right now it's all completely black and white. So the way we do that is back here to our layers panel. Let's see, let me go back and make sure we've got no questions, no questions. All right, I'll keep going. All right. So this layer here, this background copy 2 that we made earlier, just drag that up to rearrange things, right? So it's now at the very top of our stack of layers. And again, I mentioned earlier, layers, think of them as a bunch of photographs stacked on top of each other. Since we've put this copy of our background, which is just the regular photo, to begin with, on the very top of the stack, we can no longer see this black and white layer that's hidden underneath it. This little eyeball here is a way to temporarily hide or show any particular layer. So if I click on the eyeball, even though this background copy 2 is at the very top of our stack of photos, it's hidden, so we actually see this black and white layer underneath. So click the eyeball again, now we see this photo. All right, so now we want to do some messing around with this layer to get some of the coloring ready so we can do some selective coloring of our photo. The way I want to do that, there's actually lots of different techniques. I'm going to show you one under our filter menu. With this top layer selected, go to the filter menu. And there's lots of different filters that are available in Photoshop Elements. And you can mess around. We actually have a filter gallery that lets you kind of do some browsing and experimenting. But I'm just going to go straight to the sketch category and the comic filter and go ahead and select that. And that's going to bring up this filter that applies sort of a comic look to our photo. And I can zoom in a little bit if I want to kind of see what's going on a little better. That's not really the look I want. So there's some presets over here. We start with the comic preset. There's one we call Sunny Day, which gives a much brighter look. Old print or grayscale. Actually, the default one for me, the comic one, is pretty good, but I want to fine tune it a little bit. First thing I want to do is adjust this vibrance slider. I want to crank that up a little bit because that's going to make things just a little bit brighter. I don't want to go all the way to the top where Sunny Day is. I just want to brighten things up a little bit to kind of get these colors to pop some. The other thing that I want to do is tone down this outline around the edges. So Photoshop Elements has done a bunch of edge detection, created a nice thick outline to create a cartoon effect. That's not what I want. What I want to do is thin that down a little bit. So this thickness slider, just kind of drag it back down. Again, the exact amount that you want to use is going to depend on the resolution of your photo. John, if you're working with a higher resolution than that came through the email, you may want a different setting than I'm choosing here. But basically, tune down so that you've got some very subtle black edges around your subject. Or maybe even not at all. You might want to crank it all the way down so we don't really have any of those black edges. Again, it's going to be a personal preference as to exactly what look you are after. Maybe a little more vibrance to brighten things up just a touch. There we go. All right, you can play with the other sliders if you want, but I'm going to skip that for now because I've got kind of the look that I'm after here. Go ahead and click OK, and Photoshop Elements will apply those settings to this entire layer. So you can now see that we've got this kind of cartoony look on our photo, and we can do some editing as well. Now, remember, this layer is on top of our black and white layer. Again, if I click the eyeball, we still have our black and white layer underneath, the pencil sketch layer. And then on top of that, we have this background. And I'm going to double click on the name and rename it Comic, again, just to sort of help keep track of layers. All right, so now I'm going to take this whole layers thing to the next level. I'm going to go back and see if we have a question. Nope, no question, good. Take layers to a next level with something called layer masks. Now, the combination of layers and layer masks is really going to create a lot of power for you in Photoshop Elements. Yeah, so when you get a chance, make sure you kind of dig into them. So with this layer selected, our layer that we've renamed Comic because we applied the Comic filter to it, there's this little icon right here. Above our layers panel, there's a bunch of little icons. This square with a round circle in the middle of it is the icon or button that we use to add a layer mask. And so go ahead and click that, and you can see when I do that, it adds this little white thumbnail over to the right of our picture. And some of our other layers already had them because the filters we applied automatically added layers masks for us. But here the Comic filter didn't, so we have to add one by ourselves. Now the way layer masks work is it's a way to sort of selectively click this little eyeball. All right, if I click this little eyeball, that entire layer is hidden. If I click it again, it's brought back. And the way layer masks work is where I paint black on a layer mask, that layer is hidden. And where I paint white on a layer mask, that layer is showing. So you can see right now this entire layer mask is white, which means this entire layer is showing. But if I grab over here on the left my brush tool and I paint with black, let me open up my tool options down here in the bottom. I'll click tool options to open up this panel and maybe make a big brush, and maybe not that big. There we go, something like that. You can see I'll paint up here kind of near the scoreboard. With my layer mask selected, right, I click on it so it's selected. I've got this little light blue rectangle around it. If I paint with black, what it does is paints black on the layer mask, and that hides just that section of the layer. So anywhere there's white, it shows. Anywhere there's black, it's hidden. If I make a mistake, I can change my painting color from black to white, and I could paint like over the scoreboard, and it brings the scoreboard back, right? You can see here I've punched a little white hole in the middle of that black area, and so the scoreboard is showing through. So I can selectively show or hide any section of any layer by either painting black or white. So let me do a couple undos to get back to it being all white, because what I want to do is temporarily paint black everywhere. So I'm going to change my foreground color to black. This little button here, it will set my foreground and background color to white and black respectively. And then this little arrow right here will switch foreground and background. So I can use the arrow to switch back and forth, or actually there's a keyboard shortcut, my X key will switch them back and forth. And that's a shortcut you're going to want to kind of learn because we're going to be switching back and forth between black and white painting quite a lot in the next 5-10 minutes. Okay, so we want black as our foreground color. And instead of our brush tool, we want our paint bucket tool. So go ahead and click the paint bucket tool. Make sure our layer mask is selected over here on the right. And then just come back over here and click. And that's going to paint black everywhere in our layer mask, thereby hiding that entire layer. Because we now want to switch back to our brush, this top left in our draw section. We want to switch from black being our foreground color to white being our foreground color. Again, you can click this little double-headed twisty arrow thing, or just hit the X key on your keyboard, and that'll switch foreground and background as well. Now we want to come in and pick a brush. We want probably one of these softish edge brushes, and maybe something smaller than that. We have a brush slider here. I can make it small. Up here, hopefully you can see my brush cursor, it's a round circle. Or I can make it bigger by sliding that slider and make it bigger. There's also a keyboard shortcut. The two keys on your keyboard to the right of the P key, the square bracket, the left square bracket and the right square bracket are keyboard shortcuts. If I press the left square bracket, the one immediately left, I'm sorry, the immediate to the right of our P key, it's going to make my brush smaller. If I press the right square bracket, it's going to make my brush bigger. So again, another keyboard shortcut that's really useful to know, so we don't have to keep coming down to this size slider. So we want a kind of small brush. We want a soft edged brush. And then we can come over, let me zoom in a little bit, get my zoom tool, kind of zoom into this padded cover around our volleyball pole. Back to my brush tool, smallish brush. And if I just paint down the side here, you can see over here on our layer mask, there's a little bit of white. We painted white on our layer mask. Again, that shows the layer, and where it's black, the layer is hidden. So I painted white to kind of show off the edge of that. If I turn this opacity slider down to maybe like 33%, and then maybe paint a little more, you can see it's not as strong a red as we had on the edge when we had the opacity to 100%, because what we're doing here is instead of painting full on white, we're painting sort of a see-through white, if you will, onto our layer mask. Basically a shade of gray, somewhere between white and black. So we can move around. We can either grab our hand tool and pan our image just by dragging it, or we can use our scroll bars, or another keyboard shortcut is if you hold the space key down, it will select the pan tool temporarily, and you can pan around your image. So you can decide where you want some of that selective color. We'll maybe colorize the back of number 13 here. So move her in, grab our brush, and then maybe just kind of do some painting. Again, kind of up to you where you want color, where you don't. Maybe we'll slide over here, do some kind of scribbling on these blue shirts to give some of that, some color. So again, personal preference as to how much of that sort of background color you want or don't want, completely up to you in the feel that you're trying to create for your image. I want to zoom out so I see my whole image. If I double click on the hand tool, it will resize. And so you can see we've got a little bit of selective coloring going on at this point. Maybe I want to do just a bit more, grab my brush, make my brush bigger so it's sort of the same size as this lightning bolt along the back, and just kind of paint along the lightning bolt to give it some color. Again, completely up to you how much color you do or don't want in your image. All right, so we're getting some of the technique you were asking about. Let me switch back to this one, right? So we've got some of this kind of background color showing through our image. All right, so the next step is that we want to give the image some texture. Now that color pencil sketch filter we applied earlier actually has already given it some texture. If I zoom in, you can see there's kind of this hatchy texture thing going on, which is kind of interesting. But if I want maybe a different texture, I can do that as well. And so what I want to do is actually not texturize this color layer that we just added and used to provide some selective coloring. I want to come down and select our black and white layer, one layer beneath, and then back to our filter menu, down to the texture section, and then over on the right, there's a bunch of different textures we can apply. We want to use the texturizer. So go ahead and click on that. It's going to bring up the texturizer here with some sliders. Let's change to the scale, the zoom factor to 100%, so we can see what's going on. Maybe even more than 100%. Maybe let's go 200%, and we can drag around and kind of see the texture that's being applied. And so now over here on the right, there's some different kinds of texture. The default is canvas, but maybe if you want a brick texture, I don't know that I like that, but maybe you do, or burlap, or sandstone, or back to canvas. Canvas is the one that I kind of like the best on this picture. Kind of matches the look you were after with that other photo. And then there's a couple sliders, some scaling. I can crank the scaling slider way up. That really gives a kind of a much stronger texture. And then relief is sort of how deep the texture is. If I crank that way up, it kind of gives this look. That's not really what I might be after. I just want kind of a subtle texture here. So play around with this, both these sliders till you get the look that you want. There's also a selector to pick where the light is coming from. So if you want the light from the top, and so the top of your texture is bright and the bottom is in the shadow. If you want to mess around and have that come from somewhere else, you can do that as well. So adjust the texture to give you the feel that you want, and then go ahead and click OK. And you can see that's now applied a texture to our photo. Again, back to our original, right? You had this kind of texture thing going on. Not exactly a canvas texture, but we're getting pretty similar. Okay, so now the next thing that we want to do is focus in on the subject of our photo, John's daughter here. So in this shot, it's the football player, right? He's in full color, where the rest is in black and white. We want to do the same kind of thing for John's daughter who's serving the volleyball. Go down to the second layer from the bottom. Remember earlier we made a copy of our background, and that's because we want to use it now. What I want to do is bring it all the way to the top. So just click on it and drag it up to the very top of our layer stack and let go. And again, think of these layers as just stacks of photos on top of each other. Now that we've put just a regular old unedited photo on the very top, it's covering everything down below. Let's see, I should probably go see if John's got a question. Yes, he does. Good thing I checked. I heard about something called actions. That is something to repeat things on different photos. How do I record an action? Yeah, John, so that's a really good question. Actions are exactly that. They allow you to repeat something, a whole bunch of these editing steps. If you're going to do them over and over and over again on the exact same photo, then you can play an action and it's going to just go sort of batch, do those edits for you all at once. Now in Photoshop Elements, you can play actions. Under here on the bottom right, more, this actions choice here under the more choice will bring up, oh, it was off my screen, bring up our action player. There's a bunch of actions that come with the product. One of the limitations of Photoshop Elements, though, is that you cannot record actions. You can play them. You can go get actions and add them to your actions panel. If I click this little menu here, I can load actions. So if I find actions that I find interesting on the internet, there's tons of them out there. Just go search for Photoshop Elements Actions or Photoshop Actions. Since Photoshop Elements is built from Photoshop, the same actions will work in Photoshop Elements as work in full Photoshop. But you can't record your own actions. We reserve that to the full version of Photoshop. So if you get to the point where you actually want to record your own actions, then you'll need to upgrade to full Photoshop and record them there. All right, so that's actions. But yes, actions are a very powerful thing that will automate a lot of this work for you. Okay, so now we want to have your daughter here popping out as the colorized part of the image and everything else in black and white. And so we use this exact same technique of layer masks to selectively hide or show any part of a layer. Now, before we create the layer mask, what we want to do is use one of our selection tools to select the part of the photo that we want to remain showing. This button right here in the select section, the bottom right of that, is some of our selection tools. Go ahead and click on that. By default, quick selection will be shown, but maybe if you switch to a different selection tool, one of the others might be selected. But go ahead, click this button here, no matter what tool is showing, and then come down in our tool options. Again, clicking this tool options button will hide and show them. This one here, the quick selection tool, is the one we want to use. And then just come over here. Again, our brush resizing shortcut keys will make our quick selection brush bigger or smaller. We want it fairly small. and then just start dragging over sections of the main subject of your photo, in this case, your daughter, right? So you can see as I drag over her leg, the quick selection tool is finding the edges of something, and now this part of her leg is selected. So just keep dragging around. If it's not expanding the selection, make sure add, right over here in our tool options, make sure this add option is selected. And then drag around her foot to get her shoe, drag around her other leg to get that leg and that shoe, up her back, over her head, and you can see we've got some selection going on. Upper arm, we probably want our quick selection brush pretty small as we come up in through here, around her hand. And sometimes it's going to over select. You can see it got kind of more of her hand than we might want. Don't worry, we'll fix that later. It actually got a little extra here. Again, don't worry about that, but let's get her other arm. Now you can see, her other arm and the ball was really blurry, so it didn't do a good job of selecting there, and over selected onto a lot of this background wall. If I hold my Alt or Option key down, depending upon whether you're on Windows or Mac, instead of adding to the selection, it will subtract from the selection. So where it got a little out of control here, go ahead and hold your Alt or Option key down, drag over those areas that you do not want selected, and it'll pull that selection in a little bit tighter. Again, we don't have to be perfect. We just want to get kind of close, and we'll do some fine tuning later. All right. So once you get the main subject of your photo selected, come back over here, make sure this very topmost layer is selected, that it's blue and not blue. And then this create layer mask or add layer mask button, go ahead and click that. And what that's going to do is add our layer mask, but since we had something selected, it's going to paint black everywhere we didn't have anything selected, and it's going to paint white where we did have something selected. So you can see, as quick as that, we're able to isolate your daughter, have her still be fully colorized like the original image, and have the rest of this layer hidden, which means these layers beneath are showing through. Again, we've got this comic layer where we colorized a few pieces. I've hidden that, and now I'll show that. We've also got this black and white layer. If I hide that, we see the layer underneath, and if I hide that, we see the original layer all the way underneath. But we want to show this layer because that was the effect that we're after. All right, now I mentioned the selection tool doesn't always do a great job. You can see it's kind of messed up your daughter's arm here. So what we want to do is zoom in a little bit into where it didn't do a perfect job. And again, use our brush tool to paint black and white on our layer mask. So make sure the layer mask is selected just by clicking on it. Again, that blue rectangle around the outside. Get our brush tool, make sure our foreground color is either black or white. Again, to show part of a layer, we want to use white. Let's make our brush a little smaller. Really small because we're doing some fine tuning here. Oh, let's make the opacity to 100% because we want to kind of do a nice solid painting. Now let's just fix your daughter's arm up a little bit. Again, we paint with white to show. If we go too far, we switch from white as our foreground color to black, and we just paint over where we went too far. And so we want to kind of paint around the volleyball a little bit. Paint a little white up here, right? So do some fine tuning to give it the look that you're really after. Pan down around your daughter's face. We want to bring her face back in. And let's see. Oops. Get rid of, oops, paint with black. There we go. We want to paint with black right here. Paint with black over here around her hand, and just kind of fine tune things. So you can mess around to get things looking a little better. Oops, we want to probably paint with white right here on her hair to bring the back of her hair in where we didn't get it. Pan down, let's check around the bottom, back of her legs. Yeah, we want to do a little painting with black. There you go, something like that. So, oh, and we'll even fix under here. So something like that, right? I'm going to do it quick. You might want to spend a little more time getting the edges kind of painted in or out exactly perfect. but hopefully at this point you've got the idea. Double click on the hand to resume things so we can see everything. You can see we're starting to get some of our technique. Let me switch back to see if you have any more questions. Nope, that's good. All right, so we're starting to get there. Let me switch back to this one. So I don't know if you want the background dark like this, so the subject pops a little more. If you do, you know, our background technique so far is pretty bright. We might want to darken that up a bit. So the way we would do that is back again to our layers panel. Click on that layer that we applied the black and white effect to, and then click the Create New Layer Mask button. And that's going to create a new blank layer on top of the layer that we had selected. All right, so we want to fill that layer with black, so make sure black is your foreground color. Again, back to the paint bucket and just click. So what that did is create a layer full of black right here on top of everything that's below it. So you can see we can't see our black and white layer anymore. We can see this layer above, our comic layer, where we sort of selectively added color, but we can't see anything below it. Now, one of the other really cool things about layers is we can control their transparency, or it's actually called opacity here. So we start off with a layer having 100% opacity, but if we click on this little pull down, we get a slider that lets us change the opacity of the layer. If we crank it all the way down to 0, then that layer is essentially see-through. It looks exactly like as if we didn't have that layer at all. If we crank it back up to 100, then that layer is completely showing, and we can go anywhere in between. So again, it's another way to sort of selectively hide or show a layer. Unlike masks, we're doing it to the entire layer to sort of partially show the layer. So this is a technique where we can, you know, adjust the brightness of that layer below just by changing the opacity of this black layer that we added. So we can darken it up a little bit so that background doesn't really show all that much. Now, as we've done this, we can start to see, oh, gee, hey, here's where we were a little bit sloppy, selectively colorizing that layer. So now that this blue edge is kind of jumping out at us because the layer beneath it is darker, we want to go fix that. So I can always come back. I can click on the layer mask for that comic layer. I can get my brush, make sure my background color is black, use a pretty small brush, and just paint down the side here. Again, we're not painting on the layer, we're painting on the layer mask, and that's going to hide the blue. And so we can fine-tune things. Maybe you like the blue, maybe you don't like the blue. Kind of up to you. Over here, we can decide, you know, here we got a little extra blue. Maybe we kind of like that. I don't know. So instead of painting with black, we'll switch to white, and you can see if I paint with white, I can get some selective coloring as well. Now that's pretty bright. I don't want that. That's because we're painting with 100% opacity. Maybe turn that down a bunch, back to black, so when we paint, it'll hide it a little bit, and tune that down. Again, you can decide where you want these little splashes of color or where you don't want them. I'm actually going to get rid of it entirely by painting with black where we had that. All right, something like that. Okay, we're almost done, but not quite there yet. Let me switch back. Got no questions. That's good. The next thing that I want to do is kind of get this topmost little cutout of your daughter to pop a little bit better. It's a little bit dark in comparison. We want to brighten it up a little bit so it catches your eye even more. So back to this layer, select the very topmost layer. And now what we want to do is add a different kind of layer, a layer that we call an adjustment layer. So this little icon here, this sort of circle that's half blue, half white, is our Add Adjustment Layer icon. Go ahead and click on that. There's a lot of different kinds of adjustment layers. Don't worry about all of them yet. Excuse me. We just want the brightness contrast one. I'm sorry, no, we want the levels one. Gives us a little more control than brightness and contrast. So go ahead and click on levels. And it's going to pop up this little dialog here with a histogram. Don't worry too much about that. but you can see here it added a new layer called an adjustment layer. And the way adjustment layers work is whatever you picked from the list to adjust your photo, the adjustment layer will create adjustments to all layers beneath it. And I've picked the levels one because it gives us this nice ability to kind of control midtones by sliding this middle gray or triangular thing, control the dark areas or control the light areas. Now, as I mentioned, it's applying whatever we adjust to every single layer below it. We don't actually want that. We don't want that. We just want to apply these adjustments to the layer that's directly below it, the layer that's got this cutout of your daughter. And the way we do that is down here with this little check mark next to the eyeball. Go ahead and click that. And that's going to make it so this adjustment layer is only affecting the layer immediately below it. So now you can see when we adjust anything, like sort of the mid-tone highlights, it's only affecting that layer that has your daughter on it. So you can fine-tune. I think the original was kind of in here. What I often do is just click this auto button and let the software sort of figure out what looks best. It's still a little dark to my taste, so I want to brighten it up a little bit, kind of like that. If I want some of the dark tones to be even darker, I may do that. That causes a little more contrast. But anyway, you can adjust it to the look you're after. There we go. We've brightened up that. So if we click this little X in this pop-up panel, that'll close it. If we ever want to get it back to adjust it some more, just double-click this icon here, and that'll bring it back. So that's an adjustment layer. Again, if I click the eyeball, it will hide that layer. And so you can see that's what we started off with, and then with some adjustments to our what we call levels, we brightened up this layer a little bit. All right, two more things to show off. First thing is the texture. So this layer doesn't have any texture applied. Maybe we want to apply a little bit of texture to that layer as well. I don't know if that's the look you're after. I know in this photo, the football player does have a texture applied to him. So we're going to go ahead and do that to your daughter with this layer of your daughter selected. If we go back to our filter menu, we can either go back into texture, texturizer, and do it that way, or at the very top of the filter menu, there's always the last filter that we used at the very top. So if I just want to repeat the texturizing we did earlier, I just pick texturizer, and it adds that texture to your daughter. Now that's a little intense. I actually don't like that much. So I'm going to do an undo. I'm going to make a copy of this layer. So select it, drag and drop it to our new layers panel. So that's just made a copy of it. And then I'm going to texturize the copy. And that, again, has done the exact same texturing, but now the beauty is back again to this opacity slider. With that texturized version, I can turn the opacity down. Again, if I go all the way to 0, that layer is completely hidden. All the way to 100%, that layer is completely shown. Or somewhere in between, I can show part of it. So you can fine-tune exactly how strong you want the texture on your daughter. It doesn't have to be the same strength as the background. You can tune it down a little bit to get the look that you're after. So one final technique is I want to sort of get this layer of your daughter to pop just a little bit more. And the way I want to do that is select that layer of your daughter, not the texturized one, but the one underneath it. And under the layers menu, I want to select layer style and style settings. And that's going to open up a dialog here where we can do some stylistic adjustments to just this layer. What I want to do is add a drop shadow. So click on drop shadow. Hopefully you saw it kind of show up here. Let me change the opacity to 100% so we can see the drop shadow really strongly, right? So I can turn it on and off. You can see there's a drop shadow going on there. I can adjust the size of it. I want to maybe make it a little bigger. I can adjust the distance away, right? So I can move it far away or close, right? So sort of play with light a little bit. I want it kind of close, maybe a little smaller than that, and then change the opacity. I don't want it quite that strong. So again, sort of play around with drop shadow. it sort of creates, again, more of a 3D kind of feel for your image. Let me show it without it. Right? That's without a drop shadow, and that's with a drop shadow. Again, completely up to you, whether you like it, how much of it you like. And then I actually want to add a little bit of a stroke. Stroke is around the outside of this cutout. We can draw a line, and that line can be kind of thick or thin. It can be any color we want, right? So if we wanted a red line around the outside, we could do something like that. Now that's not at all what I want. I just wanted to highlight kind of what it is. We want a black line. We want it pretty thin, so down to maybe like 1 pixel is all we really want. And maybe not quite so strong. So the opacity of that line, maybe we want to take it down to 50%. And again, there's the without it, and there's the with it. It just sort of helps create a edge, if you will, around your daughter. Maybe even a little less than that. We don't want it too strong. As with most photo editing techniques, less is more, if you will. If you make things too strong, they often don't look so great. So play around, again, get the look that you're after. Maybe at this point, we want our drop shadow a little more subtle, maybe something like that. There we go, and then click OK when you're done. Again, back to your original, right? We had kind of this one. You can see the drop shadow they used here, pretty big and bold and blurry. We didn't make it quite that strong, but if you're after it that strong, you can do that. Now that we've got a drop shadow, we may want to come back and adjust kind of how bright our background is. Again, back down to this completely black layer and start to change the opacity of that. We can, again, make it brighter by setting the opacity to 0, or darker, setting the opacity to 100%, or anywhere in between, right? You can adjust it to get the look that you're really after in your final product. All right, so there you go, John. Let me see if you've got some other questions. I see Carol has joined us. Hey, welcome, Carol. Can you do that again where you select the daughter's layer? Where is the button? I meant to ask for the layer in levels. Again, where you select the daughter's layer, where is the button? So I think, let me select this one so that gets marked in Google. So I think what you mean is adjusting kind of some of the brightness of the daughter herself. So that was this adjustment layer. Let me completely get rid of it and go through that whole thing again. So to get rid of a layer, I just drag and drop the layer to the little trash icon. And that got rid of that adjustment layer. So to add it back, select the layer that you want to adjust. So I'm going to go all the way to the top. And this icon right here is our adjustments layer icon. Go ahead and click on that. And there's a bunch of different ones. I picked levels. Maybe this time I'll do brightness contrast just to show something different. And so that will add a new layer, a new adjustment layer with a brightness contrast control. And as I slide the brightness contrast controls around, it's going to adjust the brightness and contrast to all of the layers underneath it. Now, I actually don't want to do that. I just want to adjust the layer of John's daughter here, that cutout, and that's what this little button right here is for. So down in the bottom of this pop-up panel, if I check that little checkbox right there, it will only apply this layer adjustment to the layer most immediately below it, which in this point only has John's daughter. So I want to crank the brightness up, maybe crank the contrast down. I don't know, you can see it's doing that. I actually kind of don't like the results I'm getting here with the brightness contrast layer. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to drag that one to the trash, and I'm going to go back to levels. Oops. This one here, go back to levels, because it gives me some more control. Again, this little check mark here, so I'm only adjusting the layer right below it. And then the way levels works is this sort of center gray thing. If I crank it to the left, I brighten things up. If I crank it to the right, I darken things. And the center one sort of adjusts midtones. This one on the right adjusts my highlights. This one adjusts my darker blacks. And so I can mess around and kind of brighten John's daughter up a little bit. And I only want, oops, there we go. Yeah, I only want, there we go, her daughter, or his daughter adjusted. So hopefully that was the question you asked. If not, I meant to ask for the layer in levels. That's what I was asking for. Thank you. Great. Perfect. So thank you for asking the question. That's the whole point of doing these live, is to make sure that we get you the techniques that you're after so you can be successful. Now, somehow this got way too dark. I don't like that at all. Let's brighten up our background a little bit. There we go. So John, there you have it. Let me tune this one down a little bit as well. I don't like all that texture. Let's maybe move that adjustment layer down. Oh gosh, no, that's not at all what I want. But the beauty of layers is you can kind of pick and choose and mess around and adjust different things without destroying your original image. And you can always come back and change them again bit by bit. So as an example, you know, hey, I've got my photo here now, and I said, boy, gee, I wish when I was selectively colorizing things, I selectively colorized some of the floor for whatever reason. Well, that was, it was a long time ago that I was selectively colorizing, but I've still got that layer here, that comic layer. I've still got the layer mask. I can still come back with my brush and pick white as my foreground color, set the opacity of my brush and the size of my brush, and let's make it a little bigger, and kind of do a squiggle here through that, and I've now got some of the floor colorized. Maybe that's too much. I'll take my opacity down a little bit, switch to black, and paint back over with black to kind of tone it down a little bit. So I've got some of the reflection of this protective padding on the volleyball pole, and some of the floor. So again, there's, it's sort of the techniques I wanted to get across to you guys today. And then depending upon your photo, depending upon the resolution of your photo, depending upon your personal preference of the end result that you're after, hopefully you can bring these different techniques to bear to get the look that you're after. So again, this is, getting this technique is actually a more complicated edit in Photoshop Elements. There's a ton of stuff you can do that's much easier. So folks who are watching after the fact, if you're sort of not into editing at this level, don't let this tutorial scare you away. There's a bunch of much easier stuff in Quick to kind of get some good looks for your photos. There's guided edits, which are a very powerful set of built-in tutorials that will walk you step by step through getting some interesting techniques on some of your photos. So there's a whole bunch of these guided edits. You can hunt around in the different categories. And of course, as you start to learn some of the more basic stuff and you want to get pretty crazy, like this one, well, that's what expert mode is all about. And again, layers is sort of the really key thing to get into and learn about layers and layer masks. It really opens up a ton of the hidden power in Photoshop Elements when you want to do some more advanced editing techniques. So again, this wasn't a tutorial on layers, but if you don't sort of have a feel for them already, I would strongly encourage you to just go do a quick Google search. Something like, let me switch over to my browser, my regular browser, pop a new window here. Just do a Google search for something like Photoshop Elements Layers Explained. And I've got 132,000 results on what layers mean in Photoshop Elements. And some are good, but not all 132,000 of them are good. But poke around, whether you want to watch a video to have them explained. Some people are very visual learners and like to just sit back and watch a video. Some people like sort of, written step by step, but there's a ton of tutorials here to bring you up to speed on layers. So there we go. Let me stop sharing my screen. There you go. You see my lovely face again. Hey, everybody. And we'll maybe answer some more questions. John, this is a great tutorial. Thank you for showing me how to do this. No, you're quite welcome, John. Thanks for asking the question. Thanks for posting the sample of what you were trying to achieve. And thanks for posting the photo of your daughter. I find it's of course much easier to know what to show off if I can have a sample of what you're looking to do. And I think it helps bring the whole tutorial home for folks much better when I'm working with your photos instead of mine. So thanks for all that, and hope you can do it. If you have trouble when you try it, come back, watch the video over as many times as you want. I know we spent about an hour here, rather lengthy. I tend to yak on for a long time. But you can skip ahead, fast forward, rewind, watch the parts that are useful, and skip over the parts where I'm just jabbering at the mouth. Carol's question, are you doing this every Tuesday now at 2 p.m.? Maybe. I'm trying to find a regular time to do this. I think either Tuesdays or Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, or which would be 2 p.m. Eastern. Maybe a convenient time. I'm still sort of hunting around for the right time that I can sort of lock it in and say, okay, we're going to do this every day. But I think I've kind of narrowed down to either Tuesdays or Wednesdays, and I want to try and start doing this on a weekly basis. The best thing to do to find them is keep an eye out on my profile page for Google+. Let me switch back up. Let me switch back to my profile page. I'm still learning all about Google Plus and hanging out, but basically when I schedule one of these, it will show up here, and the timing I think shows somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Right, so February 16th, 11 a.m. These times are all Pacific times. I don't know if Google Plus is smart enough to convert to your local time. Hopefully they've figured that out. And then you can always come here to see what's coming up, exactly when it'll happen. And then after the fact, these are all recorded, so you can see the ones I've done previously. Just click this play button, and you can watch those as well at your leisure. So yeah, hopefully pretty quickly I'll get into a hour. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hopefully this was useful, and for folks who are watching this after the fact, the recorded session, if there is a particular tip or trick or technique or something that you're trying to figure out, you can either post a question on my Google profile page. I'll be checking that. Facebook, you can post a comment or a question in our Facebook page. If you haven't liked us on Facebook, that's a great way to sort of get a constant feed of tips and tricks and techniques, where we're answering questions, and a great way to get some feedback to me. I check our Facebook user comments a couple times a day just to see what's going on. For simple questions, I'll answer them real quickly. For harder questions, I'll schedule one of these Hangouts with Bob, or we also do a thing that we call Ask Bob, where it's not a live session. I actually take the time to sort of do a little cleaner job and not spend a whole hour showing you how to do something, but spend about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes at the outside in what we call an Ask Bob tutorial. So there you go. Carol, welcome. John, it looks like John might have left. John, if you're watching again after the fact, thanks again. And we will see you all hopefully next week sometime. Take care.